Happy 2020. I am back from my vacation, and there were maybe a handful of you who saw my last video when it was incorrectly uploaded. But you caught a behind the scenes glimpse at what my unedited footage looks like. It was probably pretty boring. Anyway, you live, you learn, you realize you hit the wrong thing when you uploaded the video, and you move on. So, I've had a few interactions in the last several months where I've kind of talked about my career goals, and as I mentioned in my last video, I am trying to get myself out onto the national scene. And inevitably the question comes up of, are you going to move to New York? And also, are you going to make it on Broadway? And I'll give my honest answer of, I am not necessarily clamoring for Broadway or aiming exactly for Broadway. And then I'll add, at the same time, if it happens, I'm not going to say no, which has a few times led to people kind of laughing or scoffing at me, as if to imply that somewhere in there is a sort of hypocrisy or inconsistency that, oh, well, he says he's not trying to make it on Broadway, but he would say yes if the opportunity came up. And I don't mean for those things to be at odds with each other. What I really mean is, okay, so when I was younger, Broadway was kind of the pinnacle. It's what is mass marketed. It's what the country can see of musical theater in particular, because cast albums get made, marketing campaigns exist. And another realm in which musical theater was prominent for me growing up was in Disney films, Disney Renaissance happening with Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Lion King, etc. So of course, when I was younger, Broadway was an exciting thought to make it onto the quote-unquote Great White Way and to have a show be known across the country, potentially even the world, because of a commercial success on Broadway. But as I've gotten older and have worked in the theater world, I have learned more about what goes into making it on Broadway. And it's not like I'm saying that in principle I do not believe that Broadway is for me. I'm just saying I'm not putting pressure on myself to have to use a Broadway production as a indicator of success, especially because there are many shows that make it to Broadway because they have the money and the producers, but you could reason that that wasn't a success because the show was not well received or wasn't production ready, or there were many things about the production that didn't work out very well. But I think because Broadway is so commercially pervasive, it's easy for people to set it up as this pinnacle, this goal that we need to be aspiring to. But if you look at other arts industries, you can see similar things happening. In the music world, for example, just because you don't make it to the Billboard Top 10 doesn't mean you can't be a reasonably successful musician. There are folks out there touring the country, making their lives work as musicians, and they have their fan base, but they're not known on a large scale. But I have met a few individuals who are content with reaching the people that they reach with the music that they do. So that's what I mean when I say I'm not really clamoring for Broadway, because if I really, really wanted to do that, I probably should move to New York. I probably should be working more and more hours, making more and more connections in a very businessy way so that I get my name out there beyond what I'm doing right now. But I have a life here in the Bay Area, and I really love the Bay Area theater community, and I'm not really feeling this pull to have to uproot myself and go live elsewhere in order to quote-unquote make it. In fact, last year, the most produced playwright in the United States was Lauren Gunderson, who does not reside in New York and who has not had a show on Broadway, but she's doing pretty well for herself. Her plays are getting produced around the country by theaters large and small. She is developing new works, some of which are in the New York area, most recently a play with Kate Mulgrew in association with Audible about the life of Marie Curie. In fact, it may have been called The Half-Life of Marie Curie. But my point is, you don't have to make it on Broadway in order to consider yourself a success. In fact, you might not even be wanting to be a full-time playwright or musical theater writer. You might also be a novelist, or also be somebody who writes articles for different publications. You might be a visual artist as well, or you might have a day job, but you also want to be writing. And for those folks, going to New York to try to make it on Broadway isn't necessarily going to be conducive to the rest of the lifestyle that they want. So I did have to come to terms with this at some point, where I realized that there's a good chance that I might never make it to Broadway, and would I be okay with that? And I think I am. I think having learned more and more about my field and realizing the kinds of careers that do exist and the different ways in which different playwrights and musical theater writers consider themselves successful, I'll be fine if I never have a show that makes it to Broadway, but I won't shut down the opportunity if it came to my door. And I don't think that is something that should be pointed at as a hypocrisy or an inconsistency. I think it's more just me being real with what I want and what my goals are, and that I'm not going to think less of myself if I haven't made it to Broadway, or more of myself for that matter. And I'm not going to be falsely idealistic and say I just don't believe in Broadway, because I also think that there are some great shows that make it to Broadway and deserve the recognition that they get. So this just goes back to one of those oft-quoted cliches of define success for yourself. And right now, of course, there are things that I want to see happen and change in my career, but I'm also pretty content and thankful for all the things I've been able to participate in, accomplish over the past decade of working. I'll always be thankful for the existence of Broadway in my life, because without that level of commercial success, I don't think I would have had access to a lot of Broadway cast albums. And I'm also thankful for the path I'm on right now, where I'm connected to small theater companies, theaters for young audiences, regional theaters. I think I'm doing all right for myself, and looking forward to what 2020 is going to bring me. This week I'm kind of just settling back in after vacation into a work schedule. I've kind of left the next few days open for creative exploration. That means I'll be reading books, watching films, TV, or YouTube clips that I've been meaning to watch as they relate to some of the work that I'm interested in, trying to play some piano and get to know other people's scores. And then next week I am going to jump into actually working on the first full draft of The Adventures of Honey and Leon. So that'll be it for me today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.